Hey guys, welcome to my TED Talk. My name is Justine Bernier. It's going to be a little bit more of a coffee clutch and then a TED Talk. So you know I had to represent Alabama, Roll Tide. And today what I'm going to talk about is youth training techniques for an all-encompassing development. Firstly, focusing on optical limitations in youth development, specifically laterally. So as a goalkeeper coach, I found myself constantly saying, move your feet, move your feet, move your feet. And I worked backwards and tried to work on things to help them, the keepers, to move their feet, footwork, balance, quick reaction, everything. And I still found myself saying, move your feet, move your feet. So then I started thinking about, well, maybe it's something they can't control. Maybe it's something in their eyes. Maybe they're not tracking the ball properly. And so what I did was kind of implement this very, very simple eye test that will determine which eye is the more dominant eye. And what I found was there was a direct correlation with the weaker eye and which side they struggled moving laterally. And so what I found was that the more dominant eye was actually doing the work of the less dominant eye. So whenever that ball was on the side of their less dominant eye, their tracking time was severely decreased. And so they were getting to that position that they needed to be in late. And so it looked like they weren't moving their feet, but visually they were not able to track the ball in live time, to meet the ball, to get behind the ball when the ball arrived at that location. And so what I did to combat that was had the keeper cover their stronger eye and just activate the weaker eye just by doing this. And it activated that weaker eye so it could do its job, and the more dominant eye did not have to come across and do the job of the weaker eye. Instantly, there was a huge improvement in the lateral mobility to the weaker side. So that's something to look for if you have, athletes or, that they're struggling with that lateral movement. As coaches, we're so quick to say, oh, they need to work on their coordination, or they're growing, or they're too slow. Well, no, that's not always the case. Maybe it's something else, and we as coaches need to kind of dig a little bit deeper and find the roots. Find the root why to why an athlete is doing a certain thing. Okay, next is astigmatism and its impact in youth sports. I'm especially sensitive to this. Obviously, I'm wearing glasses. Astigmatism, so for me as a young goalkeeper, and even today as an adult, things would come in and out of focus quite frequently. And I have a goalkeeper who was constantly going backwards, no matter what we worked on, body weight forward, drive forward. Everything seemed like a reaction instead of a response. And it was almost like they were surprised that the ball was there, even though their eyes were on the ball the entire time. And so I performed a little test. I held a soccer ball, about 7 yards away and had them focus on writing on a soccer ball. They could see it clearly. Okay, so focus on the writing, and I walked towards the goalkeeper with the ball in my hand. And I asked the goalkeeper, okay, as soon as if it goes out of focus, then tell me. When I got to about 3 yards away, they said, okay, it's out of focus. I can't see it properly. Okay, there might be something here. So I kept walking, and then about 1 yard away, they said, okay, it's back in focus. And so a learning from that was that, wow, this keeper is losing focus of the ball at 3 yards out, and then at 1 yard in front of their face, boom, there's the ball. No wonder why it seems like they're surprised the ball is there. And no wonder why their bounce is going backwards. If I throw something at you, a natural reaction is going to be going backwards. And so my recommendation to this keeper was, this is a little bit above my pay grade, right? I'm not an optometrist. I am just curious about finding ways to make keepers better, finding ways to make athletes better. And so I recommended that she make an appointment with her optometrist just to see if maybe there's something there. So she made an appointment, lo and behold, astigmatism. She was given contacts to combat the astigmatism and also farsightedness. As soon as she put these contacts in, right away, it was a completely different keeper. Everything was going forward. She was more confident. Her technique improved. Her performance just reached an entirely different level. So that is another implication that you might want to look at if you have an athlete struggling with, what you think might be a balance problem. It very well could be an optical limitation, maybe astigmatism, maybe nearsightedness, farsightedness. We as coaches, we need to have abstract thought. We need to be able to think critically and outside of the box. We have to challenge the normal constraints of training. right? We have to keep moving forward. And so the second area of training that is now definitely getting more of a following, more of a movement, is the mental training approach. So important. Specifically, I want to talk about the youth internal dialogue in relation to mental training. So it's amazing that we're incorporating mental training. A lot of it is kind of off the field, okay? Mental toughness, mental strength, and everything like that, which is amazing. But we can't forget about on the field, during training. So one of the things I always ask my keepers when I first start training them is, we go through a couple exercises and I ask them, okay, what are you thinking about when you're training? I would argue that 10 times out of 10, the answer is, don't mess up. I'm telling myself, don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up. Okay, well, let's do a test. If I tell you, do not think about a purple elephant, don't do it. Do not think of a giant, big, fat purple elephant with pink polka dots. Don't think about it. What are you thinking about? A big, fat purple elephant. So, if you're thinking, don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up, don't mess up, what are you going to do? You're probably going to mess up. Yeah. And that's just not a good place to be, especially when you're training. We cannot have these athletes afraid to make a mistake. It has to be a risk-free environment. I want them to make mistakes. I want them to make mistakes. If they don't make mistakes, I'm out of a job. I have nothing to fix, right? So the internal dialogue that these athletes are telling themselves during training, during competition, is so important. It's just as important as how fast they are, how strong they are, how quick they are. What they're telling themselves goes beyond the pitch, goes beyond the gym, goes beyond the ice. It breaks barriers of sport, and it goes into their real life. So we have a responsibility as coaches to impact their internal dialogue on the field, because better people make better athletes. And so how do we do that? Well, one technique I personally love is process versus result. Okay, we know the result we want. What we're telling themselves as youth athletes, is they're telling themselves the result they don't want. Don't mess up, don't mess up. Well, let's bring that back as coaches and let's tell them, okay, what is the result you want? Is the result that you want to make the save? Okay, great. How do we make the save? Let's break it down into process goals. Okay, well, I need to do A, B, and C. Great. Let's focus on the process, and that will determine the outcome. Okay, now, if for some reason the result is not the desired result, we can go back to the process, figure out what went wrong, go again. Okay, now did we determine the result? Okay? But what happens is when youth athletes, when they find their identity in their sport, when they're focused on the outcome, when they're focused on the result, it becomes their identity. Now all of a sudden, if they make a mistake in a game or in a practice, it's not that they made a mistake or they had a bad day or they had a bad practice or they had a bad moment in a practice. Now they're a bad person. Now that is heavy. If your identity is a soccer player, or if your identity is a hockey player, or your identity is a baseball player, then if you have a bad game, if you have a bad practice, you're a bad person. Well, no, that's not the case. You are not your sport. You are you. Your sport is something that you happen to enjoy doing. It happens to be something you're very good at, period. So how can we as coaches and we as parents help combat this internal dialogue that is going through our youth's head? First of all, do not describe your kids as, oh, this is Joe, he's my soccer player. This is Karen, she's my hockey player. There's so much more than that. As soon as we force that identity onto our kids, failure or mistakes in that sport becomes their identity. They become scared to make mistakes because they feel like it impacts them as a person. They feel like it impacts their character. Do not praise the result. Praise the process. If they win, do not praise the win. Praise what they did to achieve the win, how they contributed to the team. Don't praise the result, praise the process. That makes them more engaged in the process. It makes them focus on the process. And ultimately, that internal dialogue is going to change from result-oriented to process-oriented. It's going to create better athletes, but more importantly, it's going to create healthier, better people. I cannot stress enough the importance that better people make better athletes. Your daughter is not a soccer player. She is your daughter. She happens to be good at soccer. So those are some different techniques for all-encompassing development in youth athletics. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in learning a little bit more, there is a blog that you can go to. It's advancesinsport.blogspot.com. It is by me, and you can give us a follow. You can leave some comments, let me know what you think, and let's keep growing together. Keep growing, keep dreaming, and we must keep moving forward. Cheers.